Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed. What is going on, you guys? Welcome to a new episode of Why We Succeed. I'm Immanuel, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, none other than Sabrina Kaufmann. What is going on, Sabrina?
Hello, thanks so much for having me here.
Oh man, it is such an honor to have you on the podcast today. I'm super excited to dive into your journey as an illustrator and a businesswoman. And the first thing that really caught my eye is that you started by publishing your book at 14, became a teacher at 16, and now today you have your business. You are doing so many amazing things. So how was that like, publishing your first manga book at 14?
Well, actually, it was kind of funny because when I was a child, I always wanted to write something like Harry Potter or be a best-selling author. Nice. And then I just discovered self-publishing, and it's really the thing. You go to Google, you type self-publish your book, and then you find lots of websites, and that's how it happened actually. So yeah, I just got a few copies which I distributed to my school, and there were some friends and teachers who started buying it, and it's how things started. So yeah, actually, when I think back, my art was crap. There were so many problems, and it makes me cringe right now. But I think that's just what allowed me to get started, to just do the thing and then see how people react, what you can improve. Because if you don't start, you'll never know when you're ready or what you can improve. So I think that's really something that helped me just, get out.
Yeah, and what you just said there is so important, is if you don't start, you may never, ever get out there. And
exactly.
I'm curious, you work with our artists, right? You're a teacher. You've been teaching, once again, since you've been 16. How many artists have you come across who have wanted to quit, who have looked at their art and been like, oh man, it's not good. You know, I shouldn't even be in this lane. Like, how often have you dealt with that?
Well, I think I'd say it probably happens to at least everyone, at least once in a lifetime, because especially now with social media, there's the whole thing that you often start comparing yourself, and then especially when we're starting out, I think that it's kind of difficult to have the right self-esteem. So actually, when I started out, I wasn't on social media, I was nowhere, and I just did what I like to do. So there I was really in the super high, like, wow, I'm so cool, I'm awesome, I'm doing such great things. And I think from the moment that I started publishing my books and teaching, and especially going to conventions to sell my work, I got to see other artists that were already in the industry, that were already much farther away, and I realized that, oh, well, I'm not as amazing as I thought. And I still have so much to learn. And I've also come across some artists who said that it was exactly the same when they got into art school. Like, first you start out in your bubble and you just do things because you like it. And then when you start to get a professional, then you slowly come to realize, well, the industry isn't all pink and marshmallows like you... Like you need to put in some work, and what worked before won't necessarily work right now, because things are kind of different. So.
And that brings to mind a question that I like to get your perspective on. When it comes to the ability to be artistic or to draw, do you feel like that's a skill that people learn, or do you feel like it's a talent that somebody is born with, or maybe is it a combination of both?
I'd say both, and I think that what's especially important is the work and motivation you will put in, because, well, I've been teaching for 11 years now, so I've come across lots of students, and they were indeed the ones who told me, well, I don't have the talent, so I'll never make it. And I think first, if you really get to know the basics like anatomy, colors, shadings, then that can already improve your work. And afterwards, I think it's everything, the passion you bring in. Like, for instance, if you are super motivated, then, for instance, you will draw like every day because you love it so much, then obviously you will improve much faster than someone who only does it like once a month. And I think well, those who will really afterwards make it are really those who put in the work and to keep on. And it doesn't matter if they are gifted or talented in the beginning. I think it really comes down afterwards to the work you're willing to put in.
Right. And that sounds like most things in life, right? Is like talent will only get you so far.
Yes.
And then after that, it's about the work that you put in on your own end.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's so important. And I'm curious, as you mentioned, you yourself, I'm sure, have faced it, and you've definitely come across students who face that desire to want to quit. In your own experience, what have you done to overcome those feelings when you've dealt with them?
Well, first thing is I've always loved drawing, and actually the thing that helped me most was just forget about everything else around me. Like I just go to my room and take a pen and just draw, and then forget about I need to monetize, I need to post on social media. I just do things because I like it. And I think that's really the most important part, to just stop with all that pressure that comes from outside, and especially that you impose on yourself, because that's really the worst.
Right. And I'm curious, what do you think are some of those internal pressures that most artists have the tendency to put on themselves?
It depends on the level you're at. For me, it was always money,
Okay.
because in Luxembourg, we are a country that's supposed to be rich, and where where the standard of living is relatively high. Like minimum wage is 2,000 euros.
Wow.
Yeah, so that really started to put a pressure on me from early on. And I think when I started out, like there were lots of people who told me, well, art is not a real job. I hate this. It still comes back, and I know lots of other people who also get told, oh, you draw, is that a real job? Like, and especially like I was told that art wasn't a real job. And then you go even further and people tell you, okay, well, art may be a real job, but manga, come on, here in Europe. And then you're like, okay. So I think that's really the first hurdle that most of us will probably have, that we are often told that we need like to be secure, to have a secure paycheck. And lots of people have that image of the broke artist who barely scrapes by and who only gets famous after their death, or I don't know. So so I think that's really the first problem, where you might think, okay, it can be difficult. How can I overcome this? Can I even do it? Because I've realized that often we don't have the people around us that are already in the industry, and so they don't know how you can do things. And I think it's really like entrepreneurship. If you are surrounded by a family that's only used to being salaried, how do you say
Right.
that? To work for a company, like, and then you say, I want to be freelance, or I want to be an artist. It's something that is so different from what they are used to, that people will often just put their beliefs into you and then tell you for your own security, like, no, you can't do it. And it's not necessarily because you can't do it, it's just because they're trying to protect you, like. And I think it's afterwards up to you to really, well, look within. I can do it. Those are the beliefs of other people. But if I really go into the industry and ask people who have already done it, who know how it can be done, then it will be much easier afterwards.
Right. Yeah. Getting past all of people's doubts and their limiting beliefs can be so challenging, because especially within the field of art, because as you mentioned, there's this negative connotation that it's a field that doesn't pay. And I think the more accurate statement is it's a field that doesn't pay as many people as other fields do, but it does pay. Like if, like you said earlier, if you're willing to put in the work, then it will pay off. It will become profitable. It will become lucrative. And it's just that so few people, it seems, are able to do that, able to put in that amount of work. And if I'm being honest, I think a lot of it goes to what you just mentioned, is the fact that you have so many people who've never seen it done, so many people who doubt that it's possible, that they cause people to give up along their journey. And who knows what that person would have been able to accomplish. I can't help but think of myself. I remember I used to love drawing when I grew up. but I took one art class, and that's the sad thing about it is it only took one art class and one teacher with a negative perspective to get me to say, oh man, this isn't for me. And, like I just stopped. And, I always look back and be like, man, what would have happened if I would have stuck with it? If I would have taken some classes, gotten around other people who enjoy drawing as well, and, built that community, right?
Yes. Yeah, when you mention a community, I think it's also something important that I got to realize now a few years ago. It's that when you start out, I think that most of us have that false image of either you're totally broke or either you're totally famous. Like, there's no in between.
Right.
And, I got into the industry because when I started out, I really thought like, okay, I really need to be like those artists who make only a living with Patreon and their online shop, or which have like 100,000 fans on Instagram. And yeah, just to be honest, I've been stuck at more or less 1,000 followers on Instagram for the last 3 years. I don't care because I still get the money in,
right.
able to do my job. And that's really something that lots of newer artists might not realize, is that you don't necessarily need to have all that social proof outside in order to make it. I've come to realize that there were lots of artists that I met at conventions who didn't even have a website. And there's really that guy, which when I started out here in Luxembourg, I really respected him. And I thought, okay, he's the youngest comic artist after me, and when I got to know him, I realized that he talks at Facebook and Instagram. He doesn't even have a website, but clients still find him. And it's not to be... Yeah, I really respect him, but just to say that you can make it without all the fluff all around. And I think what really counts is that you get your bills paid, you get your clients happy, and then you'll be able to make a living. But the thing is that most people don't see us. Like, it's definitely possible to work only, for instance, with local clients, but the people on social media won't necessarily know it. And then I think there's lots of younger artists who come and then they only see like the people who are really active on social media and who post like all your things. But yeah.
Yeah, social media can really distort our perception of reality. And, it can give us a false sense of how things are either really done in real life or what's possible for people to accomplish. And if we continue to measure things by follower numbers, it will lead people to think that, oh man, unless I have X amount of followers, I can't expect to earn X amount of dollars in this case. And as you mentioned, that's not always true. It's really about what are you doing outside of social media? What are you doing, outside of when people are tuning in and watching or viewing or looking at your life? And that's really key. Now, I want to go back to one thing. Maybe there are some people out there who are not familiar with what manga is. Can you explain to them what it is?
Yeah, well, basically, manga means comic in Japanese. And it's actually like those Japanese comics in black and white, which you read from right to left and from the back to the front. So yeah, basically it's just like the Japanese comics.
Nice. And I appreciate you for explaining that, because some people are like, what's manga? Well, like, let's help them out so that they know exactly what it is.
Well, like, just think of Pokemon. Like, I think everyone sees that style. So.
Now, I'm curious, when you hear the word success, how do you define it for yourself personally?
Well, if I go to the totally dreamy version, then success for me is having a big house, like owning, not renting, where I have an entire floor where I have my atelier and where I can draw and have all my stuff. Yeah, so that's the totally dreamy version, and I will get it someday, but I don't know when, but I will.
Yes.
But if I'm more serious and more down to earth, then I think that your definition of success can be so different and not necessarily come down to like the material things that people traditionally are associated with.
Mhm.
I've come to realize lately that actually success for me was just being able to have enough work to be able to pay my bills and to make a
Mhm.
decent living at the end of the month, and
Mhm.
still have some time to work on my personal projects. Like I have the paid projects for clients where I'm working for clients, and then I
Mhm.
have my other projects like my upcoming manga or my fashion line where I actually work on my free time and don't necessarily earn money while I'm in the process of designing the things.
Mhm.
And to me, I realized that success was just being able to pay my bills thanks to that other work and
Mhm.
still have the freedom actually to do what I still liked and believed in.
Right. Now, I want to go back to something that you had mentioned earlier, and I think it kind of ties into this, which is when you mentioned earlier about the first book that you were able to publish. It seemed like it was something that you always knew would happen. Well, was it always something that you were like, yo, I'm going to make a business out of drawing, out of my illustrations, out of manga? Was that always what you envisioned?
Well, the book, I think it was really since I was a child. Like I think I already wrote my first stories in kindergarten.
Wow.
And it was really the thing that I just wanted to get that book out. And
Yes.
just to give an example, like the first book I published, I think that I had written and drawn like over 50 different versions
Wow.
over that whole time.
Mhm.
And so I think that if you put in so much work, then it's bound to happen because I really had no life except putting that book out. But actually, I didn't know that I wanted to make a living with art because I
Mm.
still had that idea that art isn't a sustainable job and
Mm.
manga even less. So when I was done with high school, like the last 2 years of high school, I was already earning money and I had my courses and I was selling books. But I decided to stop everything and to become a super cool manager because like my other dream was always running a business and have a tailor-made costumes and
Mhm.
running in high heels. So that was the other dream. And because like in my head I didn't know how to make art a sustainable living.
Mm.
I really started to sell my art stuff because I decided, okay, high school is over, now I'm getting serious and I'm doing something else.
Right.
But so I think it wasn't really like the life goal of me saying, okay, I really want to do this because
Mhm.
I didn't know how to do. And what really helped me was doing a gap year and realizing that being a school teacher actually wasn't my dream. Then I got this opportunity of someone introducing me to conventions and saying, hey, we have a booth at a local fair and do you want to sell your book with us? And I was like, wait, okay, those old books that make me cringe? No, okay. And then over those 6 months, I think I totally got into it again to create a whole new book.
Wow.
And then that's how I started. And that was really the turning point. Like I think I was 18. And that was really the turning point where I was at a convention with people I had never seen before. And she suddenly told me, oh, wow, that's cool. And we like what you do. And then I got invited to the next conventions and I
Wow.
met other clients and a publisher. And that's really how things continued and where I really saw the opportunities from within the industry. Because before it was like, okay, I'm just doing what I like and then we'll see what will work. And here it was really, okay, I got to see other artists who could give me advice. I could really see that there were people who were interested, that there was a potential for clients. So that's really what changed once I really got into the real industry.
That's amazing because you actually answered the question I was going to ask because I'm like, I was wondering where that shift happened where you were like, okay, well, I don't know if I can do this as a profession, and then things change. And it's amazing, just somebody inviting you to a convention. And that brings to mind, what would you encourage to the artists out there, the illustrators who are not yet involved in a community, who haven't gone to any conventions, would you say, hey, you need to start going to conventions, you need to start becoming a part of a community with other like-minded people? Would you encourage that?
Well, I definitely think that the community aspect is something so important because it really helps you talk with like-minded people who have the same interests, who also have their own experience, which they can share. I remember when I was younger, I started blogging, and that's really where I've met the first other manga fans, because in my environment, I think I only had two friends who were into manga. And like with blogging and the internet, it was really, wow, there are other people who like to draw like manga. That's amazing. And like I remember that I loved getting online with them just to share our stories, to give each other advice. And then we always challenged ourselves outside of our comfort zone, like, oh, hey, why didn't you draw a background there? Or don't you think that the hand here looked a little weird? And it was really, we were so passionate about drawing and exchanging about things that we naturally leveled up everyone together. And
that's good. That's good. Now, I'm curious, when you started to look at it as a profession, as a business, when you started to realize like, oh man, like I can actually take the thing that I'm passionate about and begin to earn a living from it, how did that impact your mindset? You know, because clearly there's time that you have to allot to the business aspect, but then there's also time that you want to spend doing the thing that you enjoy doing, which is drawing and illustrating. So how do you manage the two of those simultaneously?
Well, I always used to be overly productive and wanting results and being super organized and stuff. So I think it's important to mention that once I got started with conventions, I didn't tell myself, okay, now I'm here and I can do it just like this, like it will work out. I got back to school to have another diploma, so I studied business, actually.
Okay. Nice.
And it was like, management, because I still had that idea, okay, if it doesn't work out, I think it could work out and I will try it, but if not, then I'll get back to the manager thing.
Right.
And those were actually 2 years where I was at school, so uni. And during that time, I really continued with conventions, publishing things, getting stuff out, just to see how will people react, how can I evolve, how many clients can I have, how much revenue can I have. And it was really the thing that I needed. Yeah, during my last months at school, I needed to turn down clients because I couldn't take them on because I had school. So I was really juggling between school during the week and then evenings and weekends, conventions, clients and stuff. And that's what really allowed me afterwards to go freelance. So concerning your mindset question, when I got to that, like I was aware, I was telling myself, okay, it's cool, I can do it. Yeah, and I remember like when I was finished with school, the day after my diploma event, I went to a convention, and it was the first big convention that was in another country. So I was like, okay, I'm super hype, I can do it, and it's great. But I think it was really like the first half year, at least, I suddenly started to be so scared because I realized, oh, wow, okay, I've really done it. I have my papers, and now, well, I need to make things work. And my biggest problem, as I already mentioned, was always money, because I always thought, okay, like getting 2,000 euros alone myself with art will be impossible. I don't know how I can do it, and I never know where my clients will come. And I think this also tied down to me starting to have a very bad self-esteem, because I was already starting to see those other artists. And because before it was like, okay, there are the artists who are already making a living and it's great, but I'm not one of them, so I don't need to worry. And now suddenly I really got into a mindset where I told myself, oh crap, there's so much competition around me. I don't have any clients or not enough clients. There are so many people who do the same thing. I don't have any money to leave my parents' home. And so, yeah, things really got totally messy in my head. And it was really the fact that I was constantly in survival mode, like, okay, I'm taking on this opportunity because I need the money and not because I want to do it.
Right.
And okay, there were some which were cool, but in the end, I think that I took lots of decisions out of fear. And not because it was something that I was truly passionate about. And that's really something I've been working on a lot over the last few years. Sorry. Ultimately, it came down to a burnout.
Wow. And, burnout is something that many of us experience, right? And it can have different levels of impact on us. I'm curious, what type of impact did your burnout have? Like, what was some of the byproduct or the results of it?
Well, the burnout, I really didn't see it coming because it was like I was alternating between phases where I was like, wow, things are working super well and I'm totally amazing. And phases where I was like, oh gosh, I'm so crap, I can't do anything. And ultimately, my way of coping was always accepting more and more and more, because in my mind, it was like having a totally booked out agenda and always being stressed out was equaling success to me back then.
Wow.
And the problem was that obviously I did too much.
Right.
And then there really came the moment where I had so much, and there were some clients with whom I got some negative experiences, especially because of the fact that I told myself that I can't set any boundaries, which are so important. Because there were really times where I had so much to do that I had some workshops. I got home like at 7 in the evening, and then I kept on drawing until 11 in the evening for the clients, so that they could have the product the next morning at 8. So that they could immediately validate. And then there are the clients who didn't care. Like, well, it's not that they didn't care, but they took their time, and obviously they didn't answer immediately at 8, and then they let some days pass. And I felt kind of always anxious and resentful. Like, I'm putting in so much work. Why can't they put in the work too and take me seriously? The problem is that because I didn't have those boundaries for myself to protect myself, to take care of myself, it ended up really being too much. And then I got into this burnout mode where I just got so resentful about this job and about drawing and not taking care of my own needs, that there are really some commissions where I'm not proud to say it because it's bad for the client. I should have done better, but there was really that moment where I had the pen in my hand, and then I started shaking. And I just felt like throwing up, and I couldn't hold that pencil anymore. And that's really the moment where I realized, okay, I'll finish those jobs, but afterwards I'll quit drawing. And the result was really, I want to totally quit drawing. I don't know what to do. I will quit drawing.
Wow. Like, yeah, those are some major impacts from that burnout. And,
yes,
it puts you all the way in a place where it made you almost want to quit doing what you enjoy doing. And, that's definitely a sign of, oh, man, something isn't right. And you hit on something that I think is so important in every aspect of our life, which is boundaries. And from your own personal experience, what were some of the boundaries that you realized you needed to start putting in place so that you could avoid burnout in future situations?
Well, taking my own needs into consideration.
Yes.
Like, for instance, it's so stupid to work until midnight for clients, like, because when will you have your free time? If you don't set your own free time for yourself, then it's not working. And I think the problem was also that when you work from home, like you don't necessarily have those boundaries where you tell yourself, okay, I have that 9 to 5 and I come home and then nothing anymore. Because it's really, I do what I want whenever I want, and then it's kind of difficult. Yeah, so I think the first boundary was really learning to respect myself and listen to my intuition. Like, I know there are some projects or things that I shouldn't have done because my gut feeling told me there's something wrong, but I still did it because I thought, okay, I need the money.
Right.
It always comes down to money. Sorry.
That's real.
Yeah, listening to me, to my inner voice, and then just deciding to do things that I really liked and to stop doing the things that were draining me was really something important for me.
Yeah, that's so important because this is the thing, like nobody's going to put those boundaries in place for us, right? As you mentioned, it's one of those things that we have to recognize we need. We have to start looking out for ourselves, caring for ourselves, and to a certain extent, protecting ourselves, right?
Yes,
Because if we don't, the client is going to say, hey, maybe you should stop and rest. Like, nah, they're like, yo, you working on my project. I don't care how you do it, just get it done. And as you mentioned too, some of the projects that we take on, we do it solely for the compensation. And I know in my own experience that often comes with the drawback, right? Where you're like either making concessions in order to earn the money, or you're doing things that maybe put you in a position where you have to overwork, or even some places, sometimes depending on what type of work people are into, they may even compromise their morals or their standards or the things that they believe for certain projects. So I think I'm so glad that you pointed that out, because it's so important for us to not just be mindful of putting boundaries in place when it comes to our time, but even with the jobs and the clients that we say yes to and that we agree to work with.
Yeah, and I've also come to realize that before I was always so scared to set boundaries because I told myself, okay, if I raise my prices, if I set limits or refuse a client and tell them, okay, I'm booked out, then you'll need to wait 1 or 2 months, then I told myself I will never be able to make it. And once I put those boundaries in place, I realized that actually things were so much easier, and I got much, much better clients who were willing to respect me, my time. And I think it was really the time where I raised my prices. I was so scared. It was okay, I sent that mail, I couldn't sleep. And and then they validated, and it was like, wow, really? Okay. And I really think that once you start respecting yourself, your clients will automatically feel that and respect yourself too.
Right. Now I'm curious. There's one thing when it comes to being an artist or an illustrator, but then it becomes something completely different, at least in my mind, when you begin to operate within the business of illustration. I'm curious, what are some of the differences between simply being an illustrator versus running an illustration business?
I think I'm not a good person to ask. Because actually, I've always been kind of more business oriented than an artist. Yeah, I from early on, I really tried to monetize anything I could do. Like I remember when I was like 8 at school, I tried to set up a magazine about animals because I decided, okay, I have that skill, so I can monetize it. And I think that art was like the byproduct that made me decide, okay, I can do that well, so I can start doing a business with that.
I'm so glad that you point that out, because in my experience, even personally, and with a lot of people that I have spoken to who are, either entrepreneurs or business owners, is that most people have the fear or the apprehension of monetizing their skills. And it's interesting because it sounds like for you, it was like, no, monetization is what I am aiming to do. So I'm curious, how did that help you when it came to getting you to where you are now, is knowing that, hey, these skills that I have, they are skills that I can earn a living from, and not allow that to be something that hindered you? Because for a lot of people, that is something that they struggle with, is actually ascribing a value or a cost to the skills and the services that they provide.
Well, I think it's twofold, kind of, because when it's your passion, it's something you like and you could do all day. So if you start monetizing it, then I think it will be much easier to face rejection, or if things don't work out as you want, because you are so passionate about and you love it so much that you just keep on doing it until it works out. So I think that's the positive aspect, because it's really something that will keep on pushing you. I've come to realize, because as I've tried to monetize pretty much everything I could in my career, I once wanted to do a business, like starting an influencer account with illustrated doll that I was illustrated. She was like trying out tea because I also like tea. So I decided, okay, then I'll do an account combining illustration and tea, and it will be super great. And the girl will travel all around tea houses, all around the country. I think I stopped after 3 months because the passion wasn't in it. Like it was, okay, oh God, I still need to do some content and I need to research so much because I don't know so much about tea actually. So that's something that I dropped because I didn't have the passion. So I didn't feel like I could keep that going for years and years, especially because I didn't necessarily have the results.
Right. Nah, that's important. And I'm glad, because to me that's something that needs to be shared, right? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that it's in your best benefit to monetize your skills. And as you mentioned, I'll be honest, I've never looked at it from that perspective before of like, yo, it's a benefit. And if you have a passion for something, when you monetize it, it'll actually drive you and also help safeguard rejection. And you're right about that, because when you're truly passionate about something, you're going to do it regardless of whether people are paying you to do it or not. But then if people are paying you to do it, then it's like, oh man, like this is great. Like this is amazing. Like it makes me want to do it even more. So yeah, I never looked at it like that. Man, you just shared something with me that I'm definitely going to take away, because that's very, very important. And man, that's good. That's good right there. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And
Now I'm curious. I know you also teach. How does that kind of fit into everything else that you're doing with the drawing, with your business? Like what passion do you get from teaching, or what led you to start teaching other people?
well, I always loved sharing what I learned myself. And that's actually how I got into teaching, because I had a signing session for my first book, and there were like 9 to 10-year-old young girls who came to visit, and they were like, "Oh wow, we also want to learn how to do a manga," and I was like, "I can teach you."
Yes.
And that's how things started. And afterwards, I continued, and because there weren't any manga workshops around here in Luxembourg, so it was the advantage that whenever people wanted a manga workshop, then they came to me.
Wow.
Yeah, and the thing is, actually, before COVID, like teaching was accounting for more or less 50% of my whole revenue. Wow. So that's why I'll always say that I'm more of an entrepreneur than an artist, because I don't draw enough compared to the other artists. And I always focus more on the develop the business, teaching and stuff, because I realized that I'm much more passionate about teaching stuff and planning projects and doing business plans than actual arts.
Right. No, but that's good though. You've able to identify something that you enjoy more, and it allows you to pour your energy into that side of it. So that's really good. And it sounds like you're helping a lot of people, clearly, because half of your revenue is coming from teaching. So that means that somebody is enjoying the things that you're teaching them, and adding value to other people, helping other artists to get to the place that you are, and maybe even to even greater degrees and accomplishments is a wonderful thing. And I'm really curious, along your journey, was there anybody who helped you along the way? Anybody that you look at and was like, man, that person got me to where I am today. They were a mentor for me.
Well, I always consider myself lucky to have been surrounded by lots of supportive people. For instance, my first drawing workshop, it was at a local art store. That contract lasted for 3 whole years.
Wow.
And I really tell myself, okay, I was just 16, my art wasn't that good, but there were still people who were there willing to give me a chance. And that's really something that I tell my students, just do the things, and there's no real moment to be totally ready, because you'll never be ready if you don't do it. So just start, and then you'll see, and there will always be people, no matter your level, who will resonate with what you do, who will like your stuff. And once you started, then you can evolve.
Right. That's wonderful. And when you look at it from the perspective of launching a business, What would you say to other aspiring artists out there who may not have that mindset that you mentioned earlier, where you're like, hey, I have a skill, I have a passion, I'm going to monetize it? What would you say to those people who are hesitant to do it? What is a step that they can take to begin monetizing their art, their passion?
Well, I think the most important thing is first to define what you really like, because it doesn't seem like it, because most people think that when you're an artist, you're just drawing, but there can be so many subcategories. Like, are you illustrating commissions for private people? Are you illustrating packaging commissions, for instance? Are you illustrating books? Are you going to conventions? Or are you having an online shop? Or are you teaching? Or what do you do? So I think the first thing, which is what blocks most people, is that they just don't know exactly how to monetize. And the thing is that once you get to know all the opportunities that there are, then it will be much, much easier for you to get a clearer vision actually on what you can do.
Right.
And then I would also suggest that once you're clear about what you want to do, then just try it, and maybe don't try so hard to already make it a full-time job, because in hindsight, it really helped me to stay a student, to still study while trying out what worked for me, what didn't. So that really gave me, that kind of put off the pressure of I really need to do it right now, right here.
Right.
And then you can really see how you can do it and how you can adjust.
That's good. And I think that a lot of people need to hear that, because sometimes people feel like, okay, well, this is the direction that I want to go in. This is what I feel passionate about. This is what I want to be my profession. And they will drop everything else. You know, they will focus solely on that. And let me be clear. I know for some people that works, but I would say that for the majority of people, you need to still have some other focus, something else that you can even kind of look at as a backup plan, so that just in case, you know, turning your artwork and your passion, whatever it may be, into a profession, in case it doesn't work out as soon as you will want, right? You have something else that can bide the time, something that you can continue to earn a living from, and continue to work on your skill, continue to hone your craft outside of that traditional job or those traditional work hours, or as you mentioned, outside of those hours that you're being a student.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what are some of the tools that you find have been helpful for you, not just as an artist, but also as a businesswoman?
Well, I always have lots of ideas, and I always need to get them out. And as I'm a control freak and like things to be perfect, I always love to journal. So actually, if I'd say that there's one totally necessary tool for me that regularly shapes my business and my mindset and how I tackle things, it's just a pen and a journal, like just to put out all those thoughts, because I think it's really important to write down what you think, because sometimes you have so much going on in your head that you don't necessarily take the time to take out the most important pieces. And when you're in a quiet room and you're just writing your things down, then everything becomes so much clearer, and you see what you're doing, what might not be working, what are the next action steps, and just having it on paper is so much easier.
Right. Definitely. Now, the other thing I want to get into is, not only have you been publishing manga, but you also have your clothing line as well, you know. So what made you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go from the sheet of paper to the shirts, the clothing? How did that come about?
Well, since early on, I was always passionate about fashion. I just love pretty clothes, and I also love haute couture and fashion design and stuff. Designing clothes was always something that I wanted to do, but I had abandoned this because when I was done with high school, I got accepted into a design school. And then, like, I think 1 month before school started, I suddenly started crying in front of my parents, and I told them, oh no, I can't do that. it's too difficult. I don't want to go to Paris. I don't want to, and it was a universe that didn't fit me. But then I really took that creative fashion design aspect into my artwork and especially into my manga. So, for instance, my main series since 2016 is illustrated fairy tales, where I'm illustrating classical fairy tales, and that really allowed me to completely go all in with the fashion and so on. Right. And for the fashion brand right now, it was totally unexpected. I got contacted by Louis Gartieri, who is a graphic designer from France, and he actually asked me if I was willing to illustrate some iPhone cases for his new shop, and then maybe it could evolve into t-shirts and other merch. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I'd be more into the t-shirts because I always wanted to illustrate for fashion. And then he suddenly suggested, hey, what if we just create our own fashion brand? And
nice.
That's how it got started.
That's amazing. And it's wonderful how certain opportunities will just come about. You know, I think about just the things that you've shared through our conversation, how pivotal certain people have been in your life, right? And with our podcast, it's all about relationships. You know, I think back to when you got that first big start, right? When you got invited to the convention, you know, somebody had to say, hey, you want to come to this convention? And you did that, and everything just kind of went from there. And likewise, when you started to branch into teaching, it started with being there present at a convention, and then people coming up to you and saying, hey, I want to do that too. I'm interested in it. You're like, yo, okay, look, there's something else that I can do. And right here, as you just mentioned, when it came to that passion that you had about fashion, it wasn't something that you were pursuing at the time, but the right person came at the right time and said, hey, would you be interested in this opportunity? And I'm curious for you, how important have relationships been in your progression as a businesswoman?
Well, it was always complicated because I had some bad pride, let's say it like this. I told myself, no, I'm a self-made woman, and I don't want to look like the kind of girl who got it because of daddy or because of other people. Right. So I always told myself, I want to do things on my own and then tell people, okay, look, I did it because of my own capacities and not because someone helped me. It was also that since early on, I was always in that fear mindset where I didn't dare to open up to other artists because I thought of them as competitors. That really made me feel bad. And once I slowly started to shift and get more into, get to know other artists, I really started to see, like, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, like the power it can actually have to be with other people, to exchange and to be more open about everything business and stuff. One opportunity which really showed how important actually relationships were was last year. I got into the committee of an association of Luxembourgish artists because we decided that we are such a small country, so we group ourselves together. Right. And the thing is that one of us got a call for a project by UNESCO. And he suggested it, and then we decided to do a comic for that opportunity. The comic, it was actually so crazy because we got such amazing funds by the government and by other people. And I think that we were a self-published book, and usually it's difficult for self-published books to get into libraries. And because everyone had other skills and knew other people, the book got into every single library in Luxembourg. We even got more orders for the French copy than we had ordered ourselves. So that was totally crazy. And that's really the moment where I realized, yes, okay, it's good you need to open up to people if you want to advance, because you can go only so far on your own. But when you're ready, it's really like the people who are around you that will give you new perspectives, new opportunities and things.
Right. And you hit on something that I think a lot of people in competitive fields deal with, which is viewing other people as competition. And I'm curious, since you've started to see the value in relationships, has that changed your perspective on how you perceive competition?
Well, there was actually this other artist whom I really respected, and he once sent me one of his clients over.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's a super big opportunity. Why is he doing this? Because I'm his competitor. Like, that's also something that now that I have changed my mindset around it, that I also try to do now. Like, when I have projects which aren't my ideal fit, or if I don't have necessarily the time for it, then I also try to give back to other people. And especially now with my YouTube channel, it was really a challenge for me to step out of my comfort zone and to really share how can you get into the industry, what are the good tips that you can use. I'm still not completely over it, because there are still some times where I just feel like I'm sharing something and then my heart stops beating and I'm like, oh crap, I'm pushing my own competition. But but ultimately I know that it's not the case, because it's all in my mindset, and I've seen the benefits of collaborations and being more open and honest with other people. And I think that it's really something that helped me, and I was so happy to have those people around me. So I really want also now to give back now myself.
That's wonderful. And there's one other thing that I want to touch on really quickly, which is something that you've mentioned throughout this discussion and something that I can definitely relate to, which is fear. And how long have you been aware of the role that fear has been playing throughout your journey? And what have you been doing to counteract it or overcome it?
I've started to notice that fear from the first time I started monetizing my work, actually, and it got more serious, and it was during my drawing classes. So the thing was that there was another talented artist in the area, and when I started hosting my lessons, I was super happy, and then that artist came and asked if they could co-host the lessons with me. From that moment on, it was really that I got aware of that fear, and that there was competition all around me, and that if I wanted to succeed, I needed to protect myself. And I really started to get that feeling, like my heart started racing and I started shaking, my hands went cold, and it's really a reaction that I don't like at all, but I've been feeling it throughout the last 10 years. And it occasionally comes back depending on the situation, but it's been better. And I think the thing is really to just start accepting that this fear right now is a part of you, and even if it sucks, because it really does, you can't just have a magic wand and make it disappear. And sometimes it disappears quicker, sometimes it stays for a while, but ultimately I think it comes down to your mindset and just telling yourself, it's all right, you can do it, you have already pushed through a few times before and it didn't kill you, so it won't kill you now, and you can do it.
I love that. Yeah. And I've dealt with fear for a long time, since I was younger. And as you mentioned, it comes up from time to time, but having become aware of it, I would say maybe almost like 10 years ago, I started to really become aware of how fear had crippled me and limited me throughout life. And I really had to start making a concerted effort to overcome it, and for me, that came in the just learning more about it, reading books, understanding what type of situations I would encounter that would make me fearful, and trying my best to prepare myself if I knew that I was entering into those situations so that I wouldn't be as afraid as I have been in the past. And as you mentioned, for me, I found that it's a everyday. I wouldn't say I deal with it every day, but it's something that I know I have to be aware of every day, because it could come up. Like, I don't feel like it's something that I've completely overcome. I feel like there are certain things that do still bring apprehension and bring fear. And I have to do my best to become mindful of when I'm in situations where those things may occur. And I'm really glad that you pointed that out, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, they deal with it, and it's par for the course. And it doesn't really surprise me that, you experienced it when it came to monetizing. I know that one of the things that I dealt with as far as like fear wise, but it goes back to what you mentioned with boundaries, is increasing your price. that can be scary. Like I've been in those situations
Oh
where
gosh.
like somebody's like, so what's the quote for that? And I'm like, oh man, I'm typing it. I'm like, oh, do I really want to put that number? And then it's like, okay, now I got to actually hit send. All right, I hit send and then, I do it and they're like, okay. And, it's like, oh man, like they said yes. And it's so refreshing when it happens. And
Mhm.
I'll be honest, like, I don't know if you can relate to this, Sabrina, but there were times when I was so afraid to like quote the services for what they were worth that I did the worst thing is like, I was like, well, I know if I gave them my regular rate, it would be too high. So I'm gonna just put half of my regular rate, which I'm sure they'll still think is like way too high. And they said yes. And I'm like, oh man, like now I'm doing all of this work for like half of the price because
Exactly.
I was anticipating a no. Like I would like it's not even a yes for me at this price, but I thought you were gonna say no.
Yeah, no, it's totally that.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, I'm really glad that got pointed out because I want to encourage anybody out there, don't be afraid, right? I understand you may have the apprehension, you may have that a little bit of anxiety, but if you know that your services are valued at a certain rate
yes.
and just go out there, just put it out there. And you will be surprised, I promise you, because even to this day, I still get somewhat surprised by, when I'll send a quote to some clients and they don't even hesitate. They're like, send an
Mhm.
invoice. And
Yeah,
it's just like, wow, that's
exactly.
wonderful. So nah, man, I have learned so much and I am so grateful for you diving in and sharing and exploring your journey.
Mhm.
And I think that it's fascinating, right? Because a lot of people don't start as young as you did at 14. I know when I was 14, I was probably just selling candy at school. Like I wasn't even thinking about, being an entrepreneur or a businessman. And I think that it's so cool that at that age, you were publishing your first manga, you were going out, going to conferences, started teaching less than 2 years later, and look at where you are today. And I know that this is just the beginning. There's a lot more that you're going to accomplish, and I'm excited to just witness it over the years.
Well, I've also come to realize, I think that's also important to point out that it's really when you truly are like in your zone of genius and totally passionate about what you do and not caring about the money and your fears that magic things start to happen. Because I've really realized that everything that I've put too much thought and decision and stuff, it didn't have the same results than the things where I just told myself, okay, I'm doing it because I like it and I'll just go for it no matter what happens.
Right.
And those things always had such big impactful results. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think it through and it worked.
You gotta love that. Those are those situations that just open you up and be like, oh man, who would have thought? Like I didn't think, and look, it happened.
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
and
So
that's really sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
No, that's really the decision that I took a few months ago to really, like I said, trust my intuition and really now go for the things that I truly care about because I think it's so much more rewarding because for the clients it will be better because you are truly passionate about the work that you do, so they will have a better outcome, and for you you also feel much more energetic and happy on the line. So
Most definitely. No question about that. And before we wrap up, fun segment of the show, I want to give you the pick three. So essentially what I'm going to ask you to do is pick three numbers between 1 and 16. Each of those numbers is going to correlate to a question that I'll ask you. You'll answer it, and then, we'll kind of proceed from there. So whenever you're ready, what will be your first number between 1 and 16?
7.
7. So the question is, if you could go back in time, what is one thing that you would change about your business or how you got started?
Okay, I think I'd probably say I won't change anything because all the experiences shaped me. So I think it made me who I am, even the bad parts. But I'd say if I could go back, I would kick my younger self in the ass and tell her, stop being so worried about money. Come on, do your thing and stop about money.
I love that. I love that. That is amazing. So what's your second number between 1 and 16?
Well, let's take 16.
All right, 16. The question is, what is a notable opportunity that you missed out on or that you were able to take advantage of? So either one, either something you missed out on or something that you were able to take advantage of.
That is a really good question. I don't know which one I would have missed because so the good ones. Well, I'd say probably starting my YouTube channel and just daring to do it because actually I didn't know where I wanted to go. And for me, it was just my coping mechanism after the burnout. Like I wanted to stop drawing, but still remain in the field. So it was really the thing that I decided to do to still have some work and just in the same field, but I didn't have necessarily expectations, and I was just like, okay, I will show people how it's done, how the industry works. And now it's been exactly 1 year since I opened this channel, and I realized that it did so much good because when I wrote my lessons and videos, like I remembered about what I did wrong, what could be improved, like setting my boundaries and really also starting to learn more about myself, like what's really important to me.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm definitely grateful because, I never would have been introduced to you had you not started the channel, and we wouldn't be here having this amazing conversation. So thank you so much for your willingness to take advantage of that opportunity. So happy for that. And what's your third number? Last one.
3.
3. So the question is, what is a book that you want to read, but you haven't picked up yet?
There are so many books. Actually, just to say, I don't read normal books anymore. I'm more into business and self-development books. I really don't know because I have a shelf full of books that I still need to read, but I haven't done so yet. So I really couldn't say, but I'm really much into the business stuff and self-development because I think whenever you read a book, then you always learn new things about yourself.
Well, that brings up a second question then. What is a notable business book that you've read in the past, or not even necessarily finished, but you were able to take a valuable lesson away from it that you still recall today?
Well, I remember there was once during my last year at school, I had that English and Spanish teacher, so he was doing both. And I really respected him because I loved how he worked, and he was really a role model for me, like as a teacher. And during the last year, he hosted a little competition where we could get some gifts. And one of the gifts I got from him was the book, The Timekeeper. And actually, I remember that we had that conversation. We had a paper, an English paper, and he asked like something, if we had a magic wand or something, what would we wish for? And I remember that I wrote a wish I had more time. Then afterwards, he got me that book. And it's really the only fiction book that I've kept at home, because for me it was really a good lesson about your time, about the value of time, of life, and so on. And it's also something kind of like an emotional gift because I love that teacher so much. So it's like a souvenir from what he taught me and what I'm striving to become.
That's amazing. Wow. Sabrina, I have truly enjoyed this opportunity speaking with you. Before we go, I just want to hand the mic over to you. Are there any questions that you like to ask me, or any last or closing words that you like to leave our viewers and our listeners with?
Well, I think we covered the most important things. So thank you so much again for hosting this.
Yes, most definitely. And how can they get in contact with you if they want to support you?
Well, if you want to find me, you can go to sabrinakaufmann.com or find me on Instagram at sabrinak.art. Now, I'm not active on Instagram. I'm actually only posting in stories, like just to keep people updated, because I have decided that social media sucks and I don't want to invest my time into it. And I'm really much happier, and I really, It's much better. So yeah.
Hey, trust me, like I haven't been on Instagram in years, so so I can totally relate to taking a step away from it.
Yeah, and if you want to get more art and business tips, then you can go to myartpieceacademia.com. So I also share my YouTube videos, and you really have also artist interviews and other guest artists who write about the art industry in general. So that can definitely help you.
Wonderful. And I'm going to make sure that I have the links to everything that you mentioned in the show notes and the description so that you guys can go and show Sabrina some love and support. Other than that, Sabrina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you're ever interested in coming back again, it would truly be an honor. Thank you so much for everything that you shared.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Kaufmann, and I'm a manga illustrator from Luxembourg. So if you like manga, pretty girls, and fashion, then you can find me on my website on sabrinakaufmann.com. Or if you're an aspiring artist, then you can also find me on myartpieceacademia.com, where I share lots of artist tips and YouTube videos about how to go from art to business.